Imagine Paris at the dawn of the 19th century. Medicine was a realm of brutality and despair. A bladder stone often meant certain death or a nightmarish operation from which only a handful survived. It was into this world of horror and ignorance that a young physician arrived. His name was Jean Civiale. He was unknown, yet driven by an idea. He had witnessed countless sufferings. He achieved the impossible. He invented a way to remove stones without a single incision, without a knife, without pain. He became a savior to thousands, a revolutionary who transformed the face of surgery. And then, as always happens to those who challenge the established order, he was met with fierce resistance, slander, and rejection. This is not a story of a genius's sudden epiphany. It is about how progress carves its way through layers of dogma, fear, and vested interests. A scientific discovery is not a flash of lightning in a serene sky. It is a long, bloody battle. A battle that Jean Civiale was prepared to fight. What awaited a person who crossed the threshold of a hospital in the early 19th century? Not help, but torture. Not healing, but chance. Medical knowledge was based on ancient texts, rewritten and distorted by centuries of ignorance. Doctors, cloaked in robes of authority, rarely questioned outdated dogmas. Their methods were often not just ineffective, but monstrous. A wounded limb would not be cleaned, but cauterized with a red-hot iron or doused with boiling oil to stop bleeding. This was believed to expel bad humors and prevent infection. Pus flowing from wounds caused no alarm. On the contrary, it was called laudable pus, believed to cleanse the body of disease. Pain was an inevitable companion to any intervention. Anesthesia did not exist. A surgeon, armed with only crude instruments, acted quickly but virtually blindly, relying on speed and strength rather than precision. In this world, where pain was the norm and death a frequent visitor, prejudice, not knowledge, reigned supreme. A professor's authority, based on treatises memorized for years, was valued above any new observation. Discoveries were rejected if they contradicted established views. Any attempt to change this order of things was perceived not as progress, but as an assault on the very foundation of their world, a world where suffering was considered part of a divine plan, and experimentation a dangerous blasphemy. Among those who daily confronted this horror was a young medical student named Jean Civiale. Born in the provincial town of Limoges, he came to Paris to study medicine. His path was not predetermined by a dynasty of doctors. He was a man who believed in logic, in observation, in the idea that the world could be understood and changed. Every day, walking through the hospital wards, he saw the same thing: despair, pain, death. He saw patients suffering from bladder stones slowly fade away. He saw how surgeons, despite all their speed and strength, could not help. He saw bodies break under their crude instruments and souls break under the weight of hopelessness. This was not merely an observation, it was a deep personal experience. It made him question what was considered immutable. He could not accept that suffering was normal. He could not accept that medicine was powerless against something as simple as stones. He saw despair engulf families, hope die in the eyes of the sick. Civiale was not prepared to accept this verdict. His goal was to alleviate suffering. He could not accept that pain was an inherent part of treatment. He could not accept that human life should depend on such a random occurrence as a stone. He began to ask questions no one dared to utter aloud. He began to seek answers where no one else looked. A thought matured in his mind: there must be another way. A way that would not demand a person sacrifice their life for a chance at healing. Civiale didn't just believe in another way, he started forging it. Day and night he spent in anatomical theaters, studying the structure of the bladder, its elasticity, its reaction to external influences. He experimented with various materials, trying to understand how to penetrate the body without a large incision. He studied mechanics, developing sketches for instruments that could operate in such a confined and delicate space. He consulted with skilled artisans whose hands were capable of bringing his boldest ideas into metal. His initial idea was simple: to drill the stone. He envisioned a thin, hollow tube inserted through the urethra, with a miniature drill rotating inside. For months he worked in his workshop, collaborating with watchmakers and jewelers, trying to create drills strong enough, yet miniature enough, to withstand the resistance of a hard calculus. Finally, he had a prototype. It was imperfect, but offered hope. He felt he was getting closer to his goal. He began his experiments on cadavers, then on animals. The instrument was inserted successfully, entering the bladder cavity with surprising ease. The drill reached the stone. It began to rotate, slowly, grinding, biting into the hard surface. The stone yielded, but the process was agonizingly long. Each time the same problem arose: friction. The drill heated to dangerous temperatures. Small, sharp fragments of the stone clogged the mechanism, rendering it useless. To cool and flush the channel, Civiale used a special oil. It helped, providing temporary relief, but only for a while. One night, late, as he was once again trying to drill an exceptionally hard stone, the oil ran out. The last drop spread across the table, leaving greasy marks on the wood. The drill got stuck, immovably wedged in the stone. In complete silence, with only the whisper of his own thoughts, Civiale stared at the motionless instrument. Drilling was too slow, too dependent on consumables, too risky for a living patient. He put the drill aside. It was a dead end. But it was in this dead end that a new idea was born. What if not drilling? What if not destroying the stone bit by bit, creating dangerous dust? What if it could simply be crushed? This thought pierced him like lightning. Why was the jeweler's precision of a drill needed when crude but controlled force could be applied? He began to rethink his instruments. Instead of a drill, he needed a grasping mechanism. Instead of rotation, powerful, directed pressure. He returned to his blueprints, to working with metal. He developed an entirely new instrument, consisting of 3 thin steel petals that were inserted into the body in a folded state, forming a single, streamlined rod. Upon reaching the stone, the petals would open, embracing it from all sides, securing it firmly. Then, using a delicate yet incredibly strong screw mechanism located at the instrument's outer end, the petals would slowly but inexorably close. This was a completely new principle, a new paradigm, lithotripsy, the crushing of a stone in situ, directly inside the body, without a single incision. The first test of the new instrument took place in his secluded laboratory. He placed a large stone in an artificial bladder filled with warm water, simulating body conditions. He inserted the instrument. The petals opened, embracing the stone. Civiale slowly, deliberately turned the screw. There was a dull but distinct click, then a second. The stone fractured into several large but manageable fragments. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a breakthrough. The fragments were large enough to be easily extracted in pieces, yet small enough not to cause serious damage to internal organs during manipulation. He repeated the process. Another click, and another stone crumbled. It was a moment of truth. Not a sudden revelation sent from above, but the logical consequence of hundreds of hours of contemplation, thousands of trials and errors, and an unwavering pursuit of his goal. He had found a way that didn't require deep, mutilating incisions, that minimized pain and almost eliminated the risk of fatal infection. He held in his hands the key to saving thousands of lives, until then condemned to agonizing death or disfiguring surgery. He had changed the rules of the game. This breakthrough was no accident. It was the result of a methodical, almost obsessive approach. Civiale wasn't just inventing, he was learning. Every experiment, every prototype, every failure, all were steps toward understanding. He trusted not ancient texts, but his own eyes and logic. His laboratory became a battlefield where he fought ignorance, armed with a sharp mind and an unyielding will. Remember how the drill got stuck? How the oil ran out? For anyone else, that would have been the end. For Civiale, it was a new beginning. He didn't just set the instrument aside. He dissected the failure. He took it apart to understand why it happened. He realized the problem wasn't in his hands, but in the principle itself. Drilling created too much heat, too many tiny fragments. It was a fundamental flaw in the approach. And it was this realization, this ruthless self-critical assessment of failure, that opened the path to a new, groundbreaking idea. He didn't cling to his first thought. He let it go to find a better one. This was his main cognitive weapon, the ability to learn from his own mistakes, transforming them into invaluable experience. Inventing the instrument was just the first step. The next, equally important, was to present it to the world. But how? The academic community of the 19th century spoke Latin. It was the language of the elite, of closed circles. Civiale, a man from the provinces who believed in the accessibility of knowledge, made a bold choice. He began to publish his works in his native language, French. This was not merely a matter of convenience, it was an act of defiance. He opened the doors of his research to anyone who could read French, young students, practitioners, and the general public. He did not hide his methods behind a veil of elitism. His articles were detailed, his illustrations clear. He described every stage, from the initial unsuccessful attempts with the drill to the triumphant crushing of the stone with forceps. He explained the logic behind his decisions, demonstrating how he arrived at the new principle. He didn't just announce a discovery, he invited dialogue, verification, and replication. This openness, this commitment to transparency, was unprecedented. Civiale wasn't just offering a new instrument, he was proposing a new approach to science, based on empiricism, constant testing, and, crucially, a willingness to acknowledge and correct his errors. He was building the foundation for future medicine, not on dogmas, but on personally verified facts. He didn't wait for recognition, he created the conditions for it himself, sharing every step of his journey. His articles, written in French, were not merely scientific reports. They were a declaration of war, a war against established orders, against age-old dogmas, against those who considered suffering a part of divine design and experimentation a dangerous blasphemy. The Parisian medical elite, who had sat on their throne of infallibility for decades, saw Civiale not as an innovator, but as an impostor. His method, which did not require extensive incisions or a bloody spectacle, seemed to them a ridiculous mystification, a dangerous trick designed only to undermine their authority. Accusations reverberated through academy meetings, hospital corridors, and the pages of conservative medical journals. "This is a dangerous experiment," some cried. "Patients will die from internal bleeding, from stone fragments left inside. This method will lead to new, unseen complications." Others accused Civiale of charlatanism, of seeking quick fame and money. They asserted that a true surgeon must operate with a knife, openly, demonstrating skill and strength, enduring the patient's pain as a matter of course. And this trick with forceps, that was not surgery, but something shameful, unworthy of their noble profession. They called him a dilettante, a provincial who dared to challenge techniques honed over centuries, sanctified by tradition and the blood of thousands of unfortunates. For them, the essence of surgery lay in the ability to wield a scalpel swiftly and decisively, not in manipulations inside the body that they could neither see nor control. Demands to ban his practice grew louder. There were attempts to remove him from hospital work, to deprive him of the ability to operate, teach, or publish. He was threatened with ostracism, expulsion from the professional community, and censure at all levels. His success was a direct reproach to their own ineffectiveness, their inability to alleviate suffering, their blind adherence to outdated dogmas. They were defending not only their knowledge, but also their status, their place in the world, their power over life and death. But Civiale was not alone. The real results of his work spoke louder than any accusations. Patients whom traditional medicine had condemned to agonizing death returned to full lives after lithotripsy. Their stories, their healings, their gratitude became living, undeniable proof. And not everyone could ignore this evidence. Among the old guard were those with foresight, who saw not only a threat to their authority, but also a chance for a breakthrough. Young, ambitious doctors, tired of rigid dogmas, as well as several influential members of the Academy who valued facts over traditions, rose to his defense. They demanded an immediate review of his method, public demonstrations, so that Paris itself could witness its effectiveness. They understood that not only the name of one doctor was at stake, but the future of all French medicine. This conflict divided the medical community into two irreconcilable camps: proponents of the past, clinging to their robes and statutes, and heralds of the future, eager for real change and the alleviation of human suffering. The battle had just begun. The Paris Academy of Sciences, the main bastion of medical authority, could not ignore the growing pressure. The demand for a public review of Civiale's method became too loud. In 1823, a decision was made to establish an independent commission. It was headed by Baron Percy, a legend of French surgery, a man of strict principles and impeccable reputation. This was not merely a scientific dispute. It was a trial of a method, a man, and the future of medicine. The commission selected several patients suffering from bladder stones. These were severe cases. Many had already undergone unsuccessful traditional surgeries or had been deemed inoperable. On the appointed day, in the presence of commission members, leading surgeons, and skeptical professors, Jean Civiale entered the operating room. Tension hung in the air. He began. Every movement was precise, every action methodical. He inserted his instrument. The petals opened. There was a dull but distinct crunch. The stone was fragmented. Then, carefully, he extracted the pieces. The operation lasted not 20 minutes, not an hour, but sometimes just a few minutes. Patients, one after another, recovered. There were no extensive hemorrhages, no fatal infections, no agonizing pain that accompanied traditional intervention. Their recovery was swift, their return to normal life astonishing. The commission observed, recorded, and verified. Its members could not deny the obvious. The facts spoke for themselves. Weeks later, Baron Percy presented his report to the Academy. His words were firm, his conclusions undeniable. He officially confirmed Jean Civiale's lithotripsy method was safe, effective, and represented the greatest achievement in surgery. The Academy, after long debates, was forced to vote. The result was unequivocal. Civiale's method was recognized. From an outcast, a provincial, a charlatan, Jean Civiale was instantly transformed into a national hero, a living legend. His name resonated in hospitals, salons, and newspaper pages. He became not just a doctor, but a symbol of a new era in medicine. The government awarded him the Legion of Honor. The Academy of Medicine bestowed upon him the Montyon Prize, one of the most prestigious scientific awards of its time. His clinic became a pilgrimage site. Doctors from all over Europe came to learn from him, to adopt his unique technique. Lithotripsy quickly became the gold standard for treating bladder stones, saving thousands of lives and alleviating unbearable suffering. This was not just a personal victory, it was a triumph of reason over prejudice, of evidence over dogma. Jean Civiale ushered in a new era where science and facts became more important than centuries-old traditions. He didn't just treat diseases, he changed the world. The recognition of Civiale's method brought immediate, tangible changes. Doctors who had been skeptical of the provincial just yesterday now rushed to adopt his technique. protocols for treating bladder stones changed dramatically. If lithotomy, a high-risk operation involving a large incision, was once the only option, lithotripsy now became the first line of defense. Surgeons stopped immediately reaching for the scalpel. They began to master a new, delicate approach. The results were astonishing. Before lithotripsy, mortality from bladder stones, even after successful surgery, reached 40 to 50%. Patients died from blood loss, shock, and most often, sepsis. Civiale changed these numbers. After the implementation of his method, mortality decreased to a negligible 2 to 3%. This was not just a breakthrough, it was the salvation of thousands of lives. New departments specializing in lithotripsy began to appear in hospitals across Paris and Europe. Universities introduced courses on the new technique. Medical treatises and textbooks were hastily rewritten, including detailed descriptions of Civiale's instrument and its operating principles. From then on, doctors could not only excise a stone, but also fragment it, preserving the body's integrity. This changed the very perception of surgery. From a realm of brute force, it began to transform into a field of precise mechanics and delicate manipulation. Civiale's lithotripsy did not just add a new tool to the surgeon's arsenal, it laid the foundation for the development of endoscopic surgery for all future minimally invasive interventions where a doctor operates inside the body without causing traumatic damage. It was the first step towards medicine that heals rather than mutilates. Jean Civiale's story is more than a chapter in a medical textbook. It is a living manifesto of how progress breaks through the thick walls of fear and ingrained ignorance. The man who dared not to cut, but to crush, was declared a charlatan. His method, which seemed too simple and unheroic for the era of the scalpel, became the precursor of all minimally invasive surgeries. The paradox of his legacy is that this provincial, who rejected brute force for the elegance of mechanics, laid the foundation for future surgery, proving that a doctor's true power lies not in the masterful handling of a knife, but in the relentless pursuit of a more humane path. Civiale showed that the future of medicine is built not by those who cling to the old ways, but by those willing to go against the grain, for one purpose, to alleviate suffering. His story is a timeless reminder. The most important discoveries often come not from recognized centers, but from the depths of human resolve and compassion.